I'll tell you what, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to hand you over to Terry, and I'll just shut up and let him talk. And then he can take over, and I'll just sit back and watch as a participant, if that's okay. That's the easy way to get on with it, if that's all right. I'll just say a few words that Terry can probably introduce himself, but I've been looking around for people I can work with or do co-training with or hand over some training with too, because I think it's great to bring other people in as well. And I like Terry, I like his style, I like the way he does things. And I thought I'd introduce him to you guys here. And he's got an interesting take on things and that seems to fit with my way of thinking, my way of doing things as well. So if I can hand over to Terry and let him introduce himself to you and take you through the slides, then I think that's probably the best way. So Terry, over to you, and I'll just I'll shut up and let you get on with it. Okay, cheers.
Thanks, Andrew. And good evening, everybody. I don't actually look like this. I've got headphones on, so I don't look like this. That's me with headphones. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about one of the most powerful techniques that I use all the time. And I teach my delegates this on every single training, is something that's called time-based techniques. Now, I've been a trainer of NLP for 20 years. So therefore, I've also been a trainer of timeline therapy for 20 years as well. And timeline therapy, you've probably heard of timeline therapy because it's more widely known. With timeline therapy, it's a very good technique. It was a revolution when it first came out. And timeline therapy was a way of accessing memories through certain procedures, which you probably have heard of, and maybe even some of you have been trained in as well. So you can just chat with me there if you want to. And if any of you have been trained in timeline therapy, you can just put that in the chat box there and I'll see it. And Kaz is okay now with sound. That's really good to know. With time-based techniques, just for historical purposes, there was a certain set procedure and there was a manual and you had to follow that manual. There was an A, B, C to that manual and you had to follow it. And you had to do the emotions that you were going to release from the memories in a set way as well. So there's anger, sadness, fear, and guilt. So when you went into the memories and you accessed the memories, you had to do it in that order. Otherwise, you're struck off the list as a timeline therapy provider. So it was quite restricted in the way that you could work with it. Oh yeah, and Jane's an NLP master practitioner. That's pretty cool, Jane. So you've obviously done a lot of work with time as well. So you had to follow that set procedure, and it was quite tight, and it was a script to follow. And you started the script on number 1, and you went all the way through to number 10, and that's how you did time-based techniques. There were set positions that you had to do, and there was something called a root cause, which you had to find, and also you had to go before the root cause to clear out whatever you needed to clear out. And the script was a certain ABC. Now, what happened was, when I went over and I flew over to see a guy called John Overdorf, who you probably never heard of, but to me, he's one of the best and still the most probably evolutionary NLP trainer in the world. And the reason I say that is because NLP, in the beginnings, was basically people experimenting and creating and modeling and finding new ways to make certain things work, and also looking at other techniques which are out there, including CBT and Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir, the coaching techniques, and a myriad, and hypnosis, of course, through Milton Erickson, and a myriad of other ways of working and taking the best pieces of those and bringing them together. So it is an evolving and creative field. Now, really, when you think about it, if NLP was a creative and evolving field, it should have kept creating and kept evolving. Issue was, became a bit of a cash cow where you sold a certain amount of techniques in a box, and that was NLP. But John Overdorf was one of the guys who really kept the essence of the evolving NLP Open. So he's continued to evolve and develop and continue the techniques. So that's pretty cool. So I knew about him, and I thought, I'm just going to ask Andrew to turn his mic off. Hold on a second. It's quite a bit of a noise. That feedback you can hear in the background is Andrew just doing some things for us in a good way in the background. So I went over to see this guy, John Overdorf. I didn't know what I was going to go and see. In terms of personality types, I'm a perceiver. So I was on the plane to America. On this plane thinking, I wonder how much this course costs. And I wonder exactly what we're going to be doing over there. That's me on the plane over to America going through a training course. And there was 9 guys in the room. And he basically showed us this amazing new way of using anchoring. Obviously, you know, one of the main techniques of NLP, and turning that into conversational anchoring, which I think Andrew has been doing with you as well, conversationally causing change using language, and then also time-based techniques. And when I started to listen to John talking to me about time-based techniques, it made so much sense to where I was philosophically at the time, as well as where I was with my NLP and my hypnosis at the time as well. And the evolution for me was, for a start, let's get rid of the idea of a root cause, that there has to be a root cause for anything. Now think about it philosophically. When you think about time and space and you as an individual and human beings and evolution and where we came from and all those things, and if you think about our DNA and you think about even the concept of reincarnation and all those other kind of models of thinking out there are so many models of thinking that to have a root cause of anything must, in a way, have an idea or a belief system that there's a one-time thing that happened, and then if you don't get back to that one-time thing that happened, you can't actually clear out anything. But that's absolutely not true. And even if it was true, when you think about time and space, then everything that's happening right now in your life, the now, what's happening right now in your life, also relates back to everything else that happened when you were 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or in the womb, or before the womb, or in the DNA, or before the DNA, or where in the past lifetime, wherever you want to go with that. Then everything that's happening now must relate, like a Russian doll, if you like, to everything else that's happened infinitum. So it doesn't matter actually whether you believe in past lives, reincarnation, DNA, the way it works and carrying through lifetimes to now. We can work on a problem wherever it's evolving now, which will relate back all the way to where we want to relate it back to. So that was one of the concepts that we had to get rid of, which was perfect for me, because with timeline therapy, you always had to work with problems that happen from 0 to 7 years old. So you're always trying to corral the client back to 0 to 7. So if the client said, if you said to the client, well, you know, what age were you when you're having this problem? And they said, I was 14. You go, oh, wasn't there a time before that? And maybe there was a time before that. And like, get back in the 0 to 7-year-old box, or else I'm not going to work with you. That's kind of what we're instructed to do. Now, it may have moved on a little bit from there. And the other thing about timeline therapy was you're not allowed to access, you do the whole thing dissociated. So, you know, you've got your dissociation techniques there for phobias and for traumas and all those kind of things, which is a good idea, isn't it? You don't want your client associated into a phobia or a trauma. No. But with timeline therapy, you always had to have your client dissociated all the time, although they've started to change things a little bit now. With time-based techniques, as long as you've discovered and you've worked out with the client there isn't a phobia or a trauma that's linked to the memory or the area that you're going to go and work in, it's fine to go straight inside to the technique, to the memory, sorry, excuse me. So this is brilliant. So this has now freed me up completely. And the other thing which I love about time-based techniques is you do it conversationally, just like you do conversational anchoring. You lead your client into the memory just by having a conversation. But how do you know when you've got the memory that you want to work on? Well, it's very simple. You've been trained, I'm sure, in sensory awareness. So your ability to look out there and see what's happening with your client, see if the eyes are dilated, see if there's a change in the skin toners, notice the voice inflections that are happening to the client. Has the lip grown bigger? all those things that you've been trained in to be so aware, like Sherlock out of Sherlock Holmes with Cumberbatch, to be so aware of what's happening. And there's that old story, I'm sure some of you have been told, about Milton Erickson, where he was asked how could he tell that his client was going into a trance, and the answer was he could see the pulse on her ankle, through the vein on her ankle, starting to slow down. Now, whether that's one of Erickson's stories, because he liked his stories, or whether that's true, it's just an example of how aware he may have been, and he was, about noticing what's happening on the outside. So with time-bound techniques, we're talking to the client about the area. Let's say it's money, and they're going, yeah, blah, 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 money. Well, money's never been a friend to me. And all of a sudden, you hear their voice change. You see an inflection in the cheeks that are ready. So you know they're accessing an old memory. They're accessing the value, and which is linked to the memory. So at that point, you can then bring in the script that we use. We've just done that little bit there, so that's fine. Just let you have a little look at that slide. But we just basically said that. The other thing to notice, I'll just backtrack before I go to the next slide. In terms of where it says there, works inside the modality the client expressing the issue. And let's say a client is telling you about their problem, and you can see they're starting to really access the problem, and their eyes go right upwards to the top left or the top right, which means obviously, because you know about eye patterns, they're accessing a visual cortex, which means that's how they're doing the problem in their mind. They're doing it through pictures, or they're very pictorial, they're visually based. So if they're visually based, we want to travel to the memory on a visual magic carpet, if you like. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. So let's go to the next one. We talked about that a little bit already. Didn't really need that one. And we just talked about that as well. So then the access key would be, so you're there with your client, they've accessed the problem. You can see the modality doing it because you can watch their eye patterns, or you can hear from their voice and their words how they're doing the problem. Like they may be saying, oh my God, I feel terrible. There's this terrible feeling in my heart. It's pumping and I'm hot. That's obviously they're doing it through feelings. So then you'd say, let this feeling take you back to the earliest time, which when accessed will allow the problem to be reevaluated. Let me know you're there by nodding your head. So that's your access in. It's a beautiful in. Think about it. In a lot of other techniques, you'll talk to the client about the problem, not hypnosis so much, of course, because we understand that in the trance state, we're already in the process as soon as we started to invoke the trance. But in a lot of other practices, they'll talk about the problem, then they'll set up a technique to deal with the problem. With time-based techniques, as you're having the conversation with them, you're having that casual chat, as it were. You've seen them access the problem. You've noticed with your sensory awareness, you deliver this language pattern here, let this feeling, picture, or sound, or thought take you back to the earliest time. By the way, they're already in the earliest time anyway. They're accessing the memory. And then we're just basically asking them to make that conscious. Let me know you are there by nodding your head. So then they're going to nod their head. They're there. We're in exactly. We've got the gold dust here. We're in the treasure chest. We've dug down. We found exactly where we want to be working, and now they're going to be inside the memory. Then all we start doing at this point is start asking them questions about the memory, and also with our sensory awareness, do we need to be dissociated and float up above this? Is there a lot of emotion here, or is the emotion adequate enough that we can work through the emotion and ask them questions about the problem to disseminate the problem? And again, here's the beauty of the time-based techniques. There's a few different questions we're going to ask them and different things we're going to do that's different to timeline therapy and also different to NLP in a way as well. So here's one of the things we can do with the problem. Now, here's the thing. Just going to backtrack again. I know you're reading this as you're looking at it, as you're listening to me. Here's the thing about issues and problems. You can be really confident, and I know I'm probably talking to the converted right now, but you can be confident if the client has accessed a memory, guess what? The memory is started to change already. If you access the memory and they're there with the memory, you're in the present tense with them. Excuse me. you're representing the present tense with them, then this memory will start to change without you doing anything. So why is that? Mostly because the memory has been trapped. It's been trapped with a lot of reasons, language, I call them life sentences, which have wrapped them all up, cause and effect, any judgments they've made about themselves, locked in to about 3 years old or 10 years old or wherever it is they've been locked into, with no access to the outside world. We've actually accessed the memory. We're inside it for the first time for however many years. It's time to celebrate, but the way we celebrate is keep them in the present tense, keep them present to where they are, and keep yourself present to where you are. That will start to change the memory anyway. And now, for special effects, we've got some more language we can use with them. And one of them, which is a very beautiful one, is it's like a context reframe. You say to them, notice the relationship between the you now at your age and you back then. Notice all the learnings and experience you have at your present age and what the younger you needed. Go and give the younger you all the experience and learning it needs now. So that's beautiful. So now this memory, which is trapped at 3 years old or in the womb or 7 years old or 10 years old, now this is getting access to everything they didn't have access before in their neurology. So before, the neurology was trapped. It was trapped inside 3 years old with no outside window, door, keyhole, anything. Now it's opened up to the rest of the neurology, and we're just telling the rest of the neurology to integrate all the learnings, the experience of this now 40-year-old or 30-year-old into this old trapped memory, which is beautiful. What I also do is there's a little bit extra I put on that one there. The extra that I put on there is, if they're up for this as well, by the way, you have to qualify your client, but if the client's up for it, then say, and any other resources that may be out there in the universe, bring them in as well and bring them back to the younger you. See, for some people, they may think that the resources they have at 40 years old is not going to make any difference to the 3-year-old if they're very negative. That might happen. So that's why I bring in the extra army of anything else that's out there that can assist this young child. Bring those resources in, because the unconscious mind can then start to download some new stuff and anything else which is out there to help this memory resolve itself. But the bottom line is, it's already resolving itself because it's in the present tense for the first time for however many years. So we got that as a resource. Another resource that you have is perceptual positions. Now, you may have this under another name that you've done with Andrew or through a different training company, but perceptual positions are ultimately powerful, powerful techniques. They're amazing things. I use this in the corporate world a lot. They like this, but clients like it as well. So then with perceptual positions, what we're going to do is float up, have a look at the whole scene from up there, float down, look at the scene from down there, float into somebody else's body. What does it look like from there? John Overdorf calls this re-imprinting or reprinting. Re-imprinting, he calls it. So we're basically allowing all these different angles to reframe the one angle that the person, the client, had it from in the first place. Now, the issue that the client has, in my philosophical idea, is not that there is a problem, because the problem is a fact. The event happened, we know that, and it's a fact. The problem is they're stuck with one view of it. It's a negative view, and it's a wrong view, like, you know, they're wrong, you're wrong, the parents are wrong, somebody's wrong, and there's one view of it, and that's what they're stuck with. That's what they're praying that you're going to release them from, is this one stuck view. So when we use perceptual positions, we're changing the angle that they're viewing it from. We can actually go inside another person, view the problem from that person's eyes or being, and that should start to reframe the problem as well. And the view, the size of the view often makes a difference as well. I mean, I was working with one woman in the corporate world, and I wasn't doing hypnosis. Well, yeah, we're always doing hypnosis, right? But I wasn't doing box standard induction hypnosis. I wasn't doing anything else to induce her into a trance-like state. But we were there just talking in rapport, and she's telling me about this boss, which was a bullying kind of boss, which was undermining her, was not making her feel very good, and therefore the quality of her work was going down. And I did the perceptual positions, and they kind of weren't working brilliantly. But every time she talked about him, she looked up like that. So eventually I said, oh, is your boss really tall? And she said, well, no. And I said, well, how big is he? And he says, well, she says, he's the same size as me. I said, well, okay, but every time you talk about him, you look up there, like up there. And she says, yeah, that's what he looks like in my mind's eye. I said, oh, okay, great. So why don't you just allow yourself to grow really tall? Imagine yourself really tall, and he's just down there looking like a little ant. How does that look? And she burst out laughing, trod on him, and that was the end of that problem. So perceptual positions, the way you view something, can make a huge difference to the I can't even say that. Neurology, easy for him to say, been saying it for 23 years. It interrupts the old pattern of the neurology and allows the neurology to have new pathways to experience this old pattern from. So that's another way that you can use. And here's a way that you might, if you've been trained in timeline therapy, you may be used to this kind of language. I always like to have my client learn something, even if they're weight loss clients or they're smoking clients or they're whatever, relationship clients, as well as getting rid of the smoking, as well as getting rid of the weight loss, as well as getting the better relationship or career or whatever it is they want, or money, wealth, the whole thing. I love my client to go back home with something they've learned about themselves. So this is something that I normally always use in any of my client work, but especially with time-based techniques. So we tell the client, ask your unconscious mind. We have to frame the unconscious mind to begin with, obviously. What it needs to learn from the event, the learning that has to be always there, the learning that has always been there waiting to be expressed. Your unconscious mind can preserve the events in the future. There's a little bit more language like that on the script. Excuse me. But that's more or less it. The box standard language from timeline therapy is ask the unconscious mind what there is to learn. The learning which you allow to let go of the event easily and effortlessly. Your unconscious mind can preserve the learnings. If needed in the future, they'll be there. So it's pretty much any kind of language which intimates that the client has got a learning, they can get it, and when they get the learning, the old problem can disappear. The beauty with asking for learnings, the unconscious mind knows what they are as well, is they're a higher logical level than the upset. If you think about it, when you've learned something, and I mean properly learn it, which means it's been embodied. It's not just a concept, a theory, something that you've learned about yourself. You've learned about you and love. You've learned about you and trust. You've learned about you and safety. You've learned about you and how you learn. So those real proper learnings which are inside your body, which nobody can ever take away from you, those kind of learnings they're a higher logical level than the upset. So once the client has learned from the issue inside their body, inside their mind, then that problem has now been dealt with on the mental level and on the physical level as well. And I think that's a real, to me, a holistic way of working. I tend to also work on a spiritual level as well, but I use words which don't interfere with the rapport of myself and the client. So we're looking at the spiritual level, the psyche, and the body simultaneously. And to me, that's a holistic learning. They've got something that now can be embodied. They can walk away with something that they're never ever going to turn back on again in their whole life. They've got it. So I always like to have one of those with the clients. So you do that work. You work until the memory has been completed. How do you know it's been completed? You ask the client. Just say to the client, is this now done? Is this memory complete? And you get a proper yes or a no. Now, you know this from using sensory awareness. There's either going to be a very congruent yes or a very congruent no. If the client's saying yes from their lips and their head is going like that, you know all about body language. We read body language, don't we? That's one of the things that we do. So if the body's saying no, but the words are saying yes, which we believe the body. So we get a congruent yes, this memory is now complete. Then we ask for other context that needs to be addressed. So any other memories or events your unconscious mind wants to visit, they're important to releasing this issue. Now that word important is very important, because if you just ask the question, no, obviously remembering from your training, the unconscious mind wants to get straight questions. Once we're inside the unconscious mind, the unconscious mind works on yes and no. It has a yes or a no, and it wants a very straight question that can say yes or no to. So if we just ask the unconscious mind, are there any other memories that it wants to visit? Of course, it might say, yeah, there's millions. Let's go for the next 10 years and visit a whole bunch of memories. Well, if we ask the word, they're important to releasing this issue, that's a very straight question designed to be guided towards the event that you've just chosen to work on with the client. And there we have it. And then they might say, yes, there's another one to go and work to. Then you just say, okay, let your unconscious mind take you back to this earlier memory, and they'll go and access an early memory and do exactly the same thing. Normally 2 or 3 memories, and the whole thing will be busted because the memories are linked in gestalts, like a string of pearls, named after Fritz Perls, who was a very good therapist who smoked during his sessions. Crazy when you see it on the videos. So when we've done 2 or 3 of the gestalts, the beauty is that the emotions, we're doing anger, sadness, fear, and guilt, and hurt, and blame, and betrayal, and all of those are happening in each of these gestalts. We're doing all of the emotions simultaneously, which will link to other gestalts. So once we've done 2 or 3 gestalts and events, basically the unconscious mind goes, yeah, I'm busted. I can recognize how this relates to the whole of my neurology. I will go ahead and clear it all out. Then I do a certain language pattern about generalizing the learnings throughout the whole of the neurology. Then I'll bring them back to more or less where they think now is. Then we're going to go and do a future pace. And the future pace is just basically getting the client to remember a time in the past where this would have been a problem, go into the future, and how does that now relate to them being clear in the future as well as the past. And the future pace is really important just to see on a virtual level how they're going to be responding in the future, and gives you good also access to how that past work has been done as well. If the future pace doesn't work, you need to go back. There was something just slightly not done properly in the past work. So that's pretty much it. Now, of course, when I'm running a time-based techniques training, it's going to be a few hours of a training. So I've just given you a very quick, potted version of that in about half an hour. And it'd be great if you've got any questions that you want to text through. Even if you want to speak, then there's a little, I think there's a little hand thing there you can ask to speak if you want to speak verbally, or if you want to drop in any text questions there about what I've been talking about, how it works, how it might apply to you, how does this relate to hypnosis, how, and any other questions you might have or want to have, then just drop them in there. If I don't see anything, then I might just be thinking I've been talking to myself for half an hour and there's nobody there. So please say something, so I know that I haven't been by myself for the whole talk, which would be kind of funny, wouldn't it? So, Andrew can come back in as well now if he wants to. Okay, maybe I was talking to myself. No. All right. Anybody want to say anything? Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. I now know I wasn't by myself. That was really good. Thank you. The guest out thing. It's a very good question. And Adam about the body language. Okay. Let's talk about the Gestalt to begin with. Gestalt, in this sense, because there are different therapies out there. There's a Gestalt therapy, which is where you put people in seats, and one of them's your brother, one of them's your mother, and you go and sit in the seat. You be your brother and your mother. That's a Gestalt therapy, which is not in this terminology. We're not doing that. In this terminology, a Gestalt is a memory in a context. Let's say, Vanessa, you have a context of memories around money and your experience around money. And you might have a limiting belief around, and I'm not saying you are, but somebody else might have a limiting belief around money, like I can't earn enough because, I'm not well educated. And there's some language around that and some events which link back to that limiting belief that you've got. Now that will be called a Gestalt. It's a series of memories which all link back to other memories which remind you that you're not good enough about something or other. And they all have links. That's a Gestalt, a line. So the beauty of the time-based techniques is if we access one of those memories, which has an event on it, which has a limiting belief, and we reframe that event, we can then go back to another one somewhere along that chain of events, and another one on that chain of events. That whole Gestalt should be blown out. Plus, there'll be Gestalts which are linked to those Gestalts on other contexts around, let's say, because money is in a way, is a normalization, isn't it? So money isn't really money, it's about creativity. So another gestalt might be you and creativity. So not only are we looking at the idea of money, but your unconscious mind knows that this is linked to creativity. So there'll be a whole bunch of series of memories linked all the way back to school, maybe before school, when you're trying to play something, you're trying to play with your mum and your dad, and they didn't let you be creative. So that's another gestalt which will probably link to your money gestalt as well. So not only were we hitting this one line, which is definitely around money, but we're going to hit another gestalt around creativity, which will then do a very holistic process of reprocessing of the whole patterns around money, which relates to creativity. So that's the gestalt. So hopefully just tell me if that satisfies that answer. And then Adam, so Vanessa, if you can just drop a text in there saying if that's good or not. So then Adam was saying about body language. I'll just go back to Vanessa again. So it's like your memory links. Yeah, it's like memory links. Each memory in a gestalt will be linked to another memory about that in that context. Money, wealth, creativity, relationships. We've got them held in kind of lineages. They're links and chains which go all the way back to whenever. So yeah, absolutely. So then Adam, he said the reading of the body language is interesting, but I suppose this is a sensed rather than taught. How do we learn to read? So basically on my trainings, Adam, the way we deal with that is basically we get somebody up in front of the room and we ask them to think about somebody they really like. And we calibrate. This is word called calibration that we use in NLP. So we calibrate the whole of the physiology, the dilation of the pupils, the tonality of the skin, how tight the skin is, the redness of the skin or the lightness of darkness of the skin, the jaw, the breathing, is it coming from the upper, the middle, or the lower? So we tell our practitioners to really focus on the physiology and notice what that physiology looks like when they're liking somebody. And then we tell the person, okay, now clear that screen. Now think of somebody you dislike. And think about, and then the physiology will change. The skin will go darker or lighter. The pupils will dilate or expand. The breathing will become more from the top and more from the bottom. We say, look, they're the differences now. Now you know when that person is either liking, disliking somebody, you can calibrate exactly and calculate when they're in the process of good, bad, ugly, whatever. When the client, with time-based techniques, what's happening is the client will be going blah, 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 blah. Everything will be the same. When they hit upon the memory, which is not resourceful in the context of money or relationships, something will change. The skin will go more red, people will dilate. Now you see that. It's not, you don't have to be trained to notice there's just been a difference right in front of you. As you're noticing that difference, it's then when you ask that question, okay, let this feeling, sound, or picture take you back to the earliest memory, which when accessed will allow this problem to reevaluate itself. So it's that point. So the timing is so crucial, which is why, as a practitioner, for you and I, it's so crucial that we're very aware of the outside world and our eyeballs are not turned around to the inside world thinking about what we're going to do next. We're actually watching, observing, and being aware of what the client's doing. So Adam, just let me know if that satisfies that question that you were having. And then with Vanessa, she's come back and she says, do you do this generally with the eyes closed? So I don't always ask my clients to close their eyes. They don't have to do this with their eyes closed. They probably will feel more comfortable because I think it's more easy for them not to be so concerned with the outside world and more concerned with the inside world. So generally they naturally start to close their eyes. Or if I feel that they're being a little bit polite by keeping their eyes open, but in my feeling is they really want to close their eyes, then I say to them, okay, you can, if you like to, you can close your eyes, and I'll pull my hand over the shutters like that, or with 2 fingers like that, which gives them the permission to close their own eyes because I think they wanted to anyway. But we can do this with the eyes open. It's not a problem, which is good for the corporate world as well, because some people in the corporate world say to me, I don't want to do any closed eyes work stuff. So it's good to have a facility that you can do it with the eyes open. So yeah, Vanessa, just let me know if that's okay with you. And then just seeing here if anybody else has any questions. Now, it's interesting because I noticed that a couple of people dropped out of the room and then came back in again. So I don't know if there's a problem with coming in and going out or whatever, but yeah, just let me know if there's anything else that you'd like to know about working with memories that may link to hypnosis maybe, or how to work with that inside the notion of NLP. Now, Andrew and I are quite the same about thinking about NLP and hypnosis, where they're really kind of like the same thing. They just have different labels. And from our perspective as well, everything is a trance technique. So all of NLP is basically hypnosis. It really is. Even the notion of rapport, when we teach rapport and matching and mirroring, I teach matching and mirroring of the energy, not so much the physiology. That's kind of old school, the physiology. So I teach how to match the energy of the client. When you're matching the energy of the client, technically that's a medium state, trance state, medium trance state. That's an NLP technique. So basically all of NLP is hypnosis anyway, and everything is hypnosis when we've got a client that's listening to us. So Jackie has just said she had a thing who didn't want to be stared at. Yeah, we're telling her to close your eyes or ask her what she wants to do. I always like to, it's a good question, Jackie. I always like to give the responsibility of the change to the client, but I'd like to do it in the style of Milton Erickson, of course, of whom you all know. And Erickson would say something like, would you like to keep your eyes open or keep your eyes closed to make the deepest possible change for yourself today? So you could do it in the style of either an embedded command or one of those ors, the either ors. It's a double bind, isn't it? Would you like to pay by check or by credit card? Would you like an appointment Tuesday or Wednesday? Would you like to change in this chair? Would you like to change in that chair? So yeah, I give them the illusion that they have full and utter responsibility while I take them to the place where I want them to go, is how Erickson would say it. But it does make a difference. And I even show them that technique that I was taught in my hypnosis, by I get the client to close their eyes and then hold on to relax the eyes, hold on to relaxation, and then try and open the eyes while holding to the relaxation. And then that's quite a nice one to say, hey, that's how much you're in charge. You can either open your eyes or you keep your eyes closed. So I give a couple of those demonstrations to my prospective hypnosis clients, and sometimes the NLP clients as well, just to show that they're in charge and they can do it however they like. But however they like means they're going to change. That's always going to be the presupposition. Fantastic. Thank you, Jane. I'm glad we're speaking. I'm glad we're on the same page. I like being on the same page. That makes me feel good. That's Jane. So, do you have any other questions? Oh, yeah, Kaz. I'm glad you could come back, Kaz. I was a bit worried that you got lost there in the sound. Can you explain more about the dissociation of trauma? Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm working with a client that I know has trauma around a certain area, and it's quite obviously if they've got trauma, because while I'm talking to them about the issue, their body will be telling me, don't go there, don't go there, warning, warning, like I'm lost in space. So there's lots of signs the client doesn't want to go somewhere, or they actually will tell me, I'll ask them, do you have any trauma around this particular issue? Now, if they do, I'm not going to use time-based techniques by asking them, okay, let this memory go back to the earliest time. No, because they may well access the traumatic or the phobia, and then they're going to just be in a very unresourceful state. So in terms of dissociation, basically I'm going to get them to, I say, float up above the timeline. I'll elicit a timeline for them. That's another training, but that's something that we do. Go up above the timeline, float back and float above this particular memory or event, looking down, and stay floating above. Very clear and precise instructions to the unconscious mind. So float up above the memory, looking down. I do all the work floating up above until I feel like they've got the learnings, they've got the perspective, they've got all of the wisdom from the past or the future back to the past, and this memory is now clean. And at this point, we can get them to float down inside the memory and then do some more work if they need to inside the memory. So dissociation, we call it, in NLP, we call it a VK dissociation. So the K is the feeling, which we don't want them to access, of the trauma. The V is the visual floating above us. So we're going to dissociate them from this by floating above. And you have to keep them floating above all the time. Otherwise, if they start dropping back nearer to the event, they're going to start being unresourceful and too emotional to do the work in this particular traumatic event or phobia. So then Kaz also backs up by saying, what happens if you get someone halfway through your conversation? I think what you're saying there, Kaz, is what happens if you get a trauma happening halfway through the conversation? Doesn't normally happen. It's only ever happened once in 23 years. Normally because I've done enough questioning with the client before that would ever happen. So I've questioned them about the particular event. I'm really carefully watching them to see if there's any intimation of a trauma or a phobia or anything like that. And also they probably know enough to tell me. They give me some clues. So they'll wave some flags at me saying, don't go there. So you're right. It's an intuitive feeling. It's also based logically on what you can see in front of you, but also your intuition will tell you there's a little flag saying, don't go there. Don't go straight into an event there. Don't go straight into a memory. So I'm basically using both of those techniques and ways of working with my client. What I'm feeling from them, and also logically, what am I seeing? By Sherlock Holmes, what I'm actually seeing is their eyes change color, is the skin changing color, what's happening with their body when I'm talking casually, talking to them about the issue. So normally, Kaz, they're not going to drop into something that you didn't get any warnings about beforehand. You're going to get plenty of warnings if that's about to happen. Yeah, so good questions, guys. These are really, really perfect questions. These questions means that you've really listened carefully and you've understood the basis of the training that I've been giving here, or the technique I've been giving you here. So is there anything else for you guys? Anything else that you want to know? Anything else that you want to know about what we've been talking about this evening? And then Sheila has come in with, won't they usually only uncover what they're ready to? Yes, Sheila, that's perfect. I love the way you asked that question. That is exactly what happens. They will only do what they're comfortable to do in the first place, and what they're willing to uncover in the first place as well, and where they're willing to go. If they really want to drop into a trauma and they have to do that to clear it out, then that's what they're going to do, and I'll be ready for it. It doesn't normally happen that way, because that's almost like a desperation kind of route, because there's other routes we can go down to clear out this issue for them. But if that's the way they want to do it, then that's the way they're going to do it. Absolutely, Sheila. That's fantastic. So Anne asks, would you adapt anything if dealing with trauma in teens? Oh, man. Teens have always got trauma. It's a traumatic time of life. Yes, it's going to be a bit different with teens. I'm just working with a 12-year-old now who, for the most part, is very uncommunicative. She wants to work with me because she said so. I wouldn't work with her if she didn't. I gave her some ordeals before we started to work together. So with her, she's very uncommunicative, but I found her values. Her values are writing. She loves to write. She loves English. So what I've started to do with working with her is get to write some stories about herself, get to write some stories about her situation. And I said, displace your name with somebody else's name, and it's you the character, but you're going to call this person something else. She's going to be called Doris. You're called Joan. She's not, by the way, because I wouldn't give her name away on air. But so I get teens to work with things in slightly different ways. Sometimes you're going to have to work with them in a very kinesthetic way with teens, move their bodies around, get them to do things with their body, not just sit there and talk all the time, because sometimes they're not used to that. Their intellect isn't developed enough. So sometimes you're going to have to do some muscle testing. If you can learn muscle testing, kinesiology, which is very, very simple, do the muscle arm test with them to find out things about them. Maybe even get them to do some funky things, some fun things with pendulum. Now imagine you've been trained in a pendulum. If not, it's very easy to get trained in a pendulum and use pendulum with them, because that's kind of like almost like the Harry Potter stuff. With teens as well, make things more magical. Look at what teens are watching these days, what music they might be listening to, what programs they might be watching, and then relate it to that, related to the way that they work, which is very much like Milton Erickson used to work. So Erickson was very good at finding out people's values what do they value, and then work with their values, not our values as grown-ups, their values as teens, and work inside their model of the world. So definitely adapting, very useful for teens for sure. Intuitive healing, Sheila, you've asked that before. I kind of skipped that because you'd have to be more specific about what you mean. It's a little bit when people say the word consciousness, or they say the word love, or they say the word relationship, or spirituality. That's a very common one these days. They say I'm a spiritual person. You have to really define and define what that means, and then I can answer that question. When you say it's similar, if is this similar to intuitive healing, possibly is, but I'd have to know specifically what you meant by that, because I work in a lot of different ways. I do work through intuition, but I also do work from deduction as well. So I'm using everything that I can. I've got my now state, which I use as well. I teach people something called the now state, which is a way of being, the way that you can absolutely be sure you're in the present tense. So the now state you can look up on Google it, because you'll see my videos there, because it's trademarked. So you'll see that from me there. But it's a way of training myself and my practitioners to be really, really present to what's happening in the moment, and to be present to everything that's happening on the outside, not so much on the inside. So it enables you to take away the mind and have the intuition there, as well as the logical deduction. So Sheila, the answer really is I work with both. I'm working with my intuitive side, and I'm working with my very deductive, specific side as well, where I can see everything that's happening around me. So both of those things. Great questions, guys. I like it. Thank you, Paula. Yeah. Values, absolutely, Paula. Values is the way to go. If you're not finding out the values of your clients, you're missing out on a huge honeypot of resources that you can use your metaphors with, you can use your language with, the conscious use of language, and basically the hot buttons of where they're like, the carrots of where they like to go. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so we're probably coming towards the end of this particular webinar. If there's any last minute questions, I'll answer them. But you have to be quick. So I'll give a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. I think we're done. Now, Andrew, hopefully you've been listening. Thank you, Vanessa. Hopefully you've been listening. Hopefully you come back in now. Is Andrew there? I'll type him. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Jane. Thank you very much. You guys are brilliant. I love your questions.
Hi, Terry. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm here. Thanks so much. I didn't hear anything you said, but I watched the recording tomorrow. But, the questions may look interesting, so I should catch up tomorrow. But thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming along, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. And we'll post the recording probably tomorrow, and then everybody else can get access as well. But thanks, everybody. Hope that was good. Hope you enjoyed that. And we'll catch up soon. And Terry, I'm going to buzz you in a few minutes so I can have a quick catch up with you. That's okay.
Okay, perfect.
Just make sure you're okay. All right. Cheers, everybody. We'll talk soon. Those of you coming at the weekend, look forward to seeing you there. Everyone else will catch up soon. I'm not sure if Terry mentioned it, but NLP World is a great resource. Loads of stuff on there. Courses, online courses, information. So do check out Terry's website and have a look around it. And there's plenty of information to learn there. Okay, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Colin, Beverly, and Raj, Andrea. Thank you too.